Welcome to Backyard Cigars. So glad that you could join me once again. And a start of a new season, summertime in the air. Although today's 67 degrees, a little on the cooler side, and our humidity level is at about 76, 77, which is rather high, but because the temperature is lower, it makes it easier to smoke a cigar. I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but it does to me. And today I have a very special cigar because it is, and not just because I deem it to be. It is a special cigar in many ways. But we're going to talk about just how special it is. We're going to talk about the motivation behind the cigar. And we're also going to take a closer look at the cigar, as we normally do. So let's do that without further ado. Welcome to Backyard Cigars once again for a closer look at the Pedro Albizu Campos in the Toro format. Now, this cigar was released February 27th of the year 2025, so earlier this year. And it is made by El Club del Toro, or better known as, in English, you would say that would translate to the Cigar Society / Club. A Turo is a little nickname that we have in Puerto Rico for a cigar. A Turito would be a smaller cigar. And this cigar, of course, was made using tobacco grown at Finca Neo Jibairo's farm in Rio Grande, Puerto Rico. The story that I've told many times of Francisco Castro and Antonio Castro, as well as Walter Tito Fernandez, who I've often left out. These three young men in 2017, 2018 formed a partnership. Now, 2018 is when the farm got off the ground. But they had been working in agricultural jobs and operations since as early as 2012, if I'm correct, 2013. And it wasn't until after Maria that they decided to go full force. Now, originally, the farm started as an agroecological farm for fruits and vegetables. And then later they added tobacco. It's the first farm to be certified as an agro-tourism farm. And that certification was given to them in 2020 by the Puerto Rican Tourism Company, and it was endorsed by Made in Puerto Rico in 2023. El Club del Toro was created and formed in 2018. And if we look at the farm, I've talked about the farm a lot. They began as Hydro Orgánica in 2014. So again, even though 2017, 2018 is when you had the big push for a larger farm, the fact is that they were involved in this since 2014 and a few years beforehand. And a lot of experience that they accumulated and they studied in regards to agriculture and everything that it entails. La Turreria is a cigar shop in Bayamón, Puerto Rico that was created and opened in 2018 at the same time that El Club del Toro was formed. The partnership between the three young men led to something that I think even in their wildest dreams they wouldn't accomplish it. Everyone's talking about their new cigar with the Privada Club, which I won't even mention the name of the cigar. Just look it up. I don't like the name, but today is not about that. And it's a Puerto Rican puro that they've released on the Privada Cigar Club. And of course, Brian Destin is making the rounds and bigging them up in every way possible, as well as the island of Puerto Rico. So they're riding on a pretty high wave right now, and they're having a lot of success lately making cigars, exclusive cigars for establishments throughout the island, as well as for themselves. Now, this is a 6x54 Toro. The wrapper is Connecticut shade. The binder is Puerto Rican Corojo. And the filler is Puerto Rican Criollo. It retails for about $14. And I believe the Robusto might be a little less. It's listed as having a strength rating of mild, or as the website would say, light. But that can be disputed, and I'll have more on that a little later on. Now here we're just looking at the band, El Club del Toro, and that's a picture there of Pedro Albizu Campos in his military garb, Rio Grande, Puerto Rico. And if we come up closer, you see Pedro Albizu Campos. And then you have the dots, which are reminiscent of the Cohiba dots. And there you have the little stamp of La Isla de Puerto Rico. But if you look closely, it's the black and white flag, which is the symbolic flag of resistance in Puerto Rico. And there you have the dates. That is when Pedro Albizu Campos was born. And that is when he died. And as for the band, it's a pretty light stock, as most of their bands are. I would have thought they would have rolled out a more specialized band for this release, considering that this is Pedro Albizu Campos. Perhaps, as most of the time, cost does play a huge role in it, but I do feel personally that being such a historic and legendary figure in Puerto Rican culture, that he might have deserved a more prominent band, something not necessarily flashier, but something of a higher stock first, something embossed perhaps. And yeah, sure, a little bling never hurts, but it doesn't have to be gaudy. It just has to be classic looking, and that is a critique I have on some of the bands for this company's cigars. Although, as they say, the proof is in the pudding. You're not smoking the band, you're smoking the cigar, and ultimately this has to come off. But besides that, the fact is that before you smoke it, before you cut it and light it and everything, you're looking at that band. The band is significant in sales, I believe. And while I don't think this band is going to hurt sales any, I just think that it could have been more special. Now I am repeating myself. But I don't hate it. It's not a bad looking band. His picture is, well, it's fine. I actually like this picture. It's a very famous photo of him. And I rather liked that they picked this particular photo because I grew up seeing this particular photo. So that is something that is in my memory. As you can see, the roll here, it's a deeper colored Connecticut shade, right? Almost as if it got a little sunblast to it, but it didn't. Okay, it didn't. There we go, looking at it closely. Some characteristics of the Cuban roll style where you have that little scar here. It's more pronounced in a few of their other cigars. But yeah, this is a cigar that I remember thinking to myself, needed to happen, right? They named the cigar Pedro Albizu Campos. We're going to talk a little bit about my thoughts on the cigar's name as well when I'm smoking it. And I'm just going to be open and honest as I am about everything. I love these guys. These guys, I consider them really cool dudes and brothers almost. But I say almost because we're not blood relatives, right? But we are definitely very friendly with each other. But we both kind of have this understanding that that I'm just gonna cut straight to it. I'm gonna give the facts. I'm gonna give my opinion as it is, and they're gonna accept that. They're just not the kind of people that are gonna try to curry my favor or entice me or try to influence my opinions on their cigars or their company. If anything, I think they appreciate my full honesty as opposed to me just being a fanboy because I'm Puerto Rican and loving everything they make. Now, I haven't loved everything they've made, but I've loved most of it, and I've been fully impressed by the majority of what they've made. And their tobacco's top notch. And, if you want to catch some videos of their farm, I have quite a few. And obviously, I have a lot of great memories staying at this farm. And for me, it's a sense of cultural pride. But at the same time, it's also, is it a good cigar? Is it something that not just that I'm going to enjoy because I'm Puerto Rican and I have a soft spot for Puerto Rican tobacco, but is this something you will enjoy, something you will look forward to? Because the review has to list that as well. The reality of the product, the reality of where this cigar stands, or where any cigar stands for that matter, right? Any cigar that I review. So, there we go. And I think this is it for a closer look. We're going to talk a little bit more in the video about this man, just a bit. And then we're going to talk about just what the cigar is like. Thank you and stay tuned. So you've had a closer look at it. I put it here for safekeeping. And it's been raining, so that's one of the reasons the humidity has gone up. When I decided to come outside to smoke, it was a lot warmer. It was 75, 76, and the humidity was around 60. And I said, man, this is my chance. But I waited too long, and it started to drizzle, and temperature went down, humidity went up, blah, blah, blah. You don't care. Neither do I. Well, I care in the sense that it really mattered to me the conditions in which I was going to smoke this cigar. So I wanted it to be optimal temperature, optimal humidity, but sometimes you don't get that. So this is the reality. And if we were smoking this cigar in Puerto Rico, I can tell you right now that you can't always depend on the weather to cooperate. Rains a lot in Puerto Rico, and you get flash thunderstorms. Humidity seems to always be high, yet they still manage, right? And for the outdoor smokers amongst us watching this, it may be of importance to you to know what the conditions are like, so that you don't judge the cigar too harshly, and you kind of get an idea of whether this is going to be the type of conditions that you can actually enjoy the cigar. That's very important, I think. So, I don't normally do this, but I own this, so I might as well put it to use, right? So this is the humidimeter, and this is patent pending Cigar Medics. That's the company that makes this. So I'm going to turn it on, very basic, and I'm going to just put it in and see what it reads. And it's reading 60. And then it dips to 54. Poke another section, I'm getting 65. Then I'm getting readings of 62 and settling on 61. Why am I doing this? Well, because I dry boxed it just a little bit before coming out here, knowing that it might be a little bit more humid. So, dry boxing. I mean, you can keep it somewhere cool and dark without humidification for a few days, a few hours. In my case, it was a few hours because it was kind of a rush job. I didn't anticipate lower humidity, but here it is. You've taken a closer look at him, and now we're going to find out how this smokes. Many of you are aware that I like to do extensive research before talking about certain cigars, but this one hits a little close to home because I grew up seeing and believing Pedro Albizu Campos as a hero, unquestionably one of the greatest, if not the greatest, patriot that Puerto Rico has ever had. And it's also a little difficult for me, the history and where the loyalties lie and so forth when it comes to nationalism and when it comes to the politics of, well, the oppressed against the oppressor. So they say the victor gets to write history and determine what future students will learn. And in a lot of cases, the history takes its own shape. Throughout time, certain things are disproved, and the way you look at things when you're 15, 16, or 21 are arguably very different than the way you look at things when you are in your 50s or in your 60s. So, when I was growing up, I looked at him as more of a nationalistic hero fighting against the oppression of the United States, and I didn't see the anti-Americanism that he was projecting. Also, when I was in my 20s and I did see that, I kind of had a moment where I felt, I don't know how to feel about this because I'm not anti-American and I don't have a, well, we can all say that there's a reason for everything, but I wasn't in his position. I wasn't in the position of the individuals that were being persecuted. And I certainly didn't live during that time when, let's just say, a lot of atrocities were committed unjustly. And the way that the American government operated was also different than the way it operates now. Governments change over time. So those are some of the things that I realized in my 20s. And then as I got into my 40s, I realized, wait a minute, there's more to the story. There were things that we didn't know about. There were things that happened that weren't made public. And then you begin to understand what made the man how he was, what led him to his beliefs, what led him to fight for justice the way he fought. And it was just a different time and a different era. And obviously, some of those things would not be okay today, and they weren't okay then, but it was a different time and a different mindset, and I have to take that into account. Does he still remain one of my biggest heroes? Yes, he does. He does. You can't be a Puerto Rican and say that Pedro Albizu Campos
wasn't all about preserving the dignity of Puerto Rico and its citizens, you can't say that he didn't love his patria. You can't say that he didn't improve working conditions for Puerto Ricans across the island. You can't say that he didn't do a lot of things, because he did them. But such is the thing with great men in history, is that there's always there are always layers, and you can peel one and find something, and you can peel back another layer and find something else that is even more interesting than what you first found. So many years ago, I had a dream. And this dream was a fantasy dream that I had, where I was a I was an owner of a tobacco company, and I was starting out new, and I was using Puerto Rican tobacco. This is before the Castro brothers decided on the farm and creating a Club del Duro. This is before that. And I envisioned a fantasy where I would debut with 3 or 4 cigars in 2 or 3 classic formats, Vitolas. And I thought to myself, in this fantasy, I'm going to win Cigar of the Year. I'm going to give myself that award. Because it's my fantasy. I can do that. And the one cigar that, in my imaginary world, I won the Cigar of the Year award for was a cigar dedicated to Pedro Albizu Campos. And in this tale of fiction, I create this cigar that is a Puerto Rican puro, and I name it El Maestro, and I release it in only one size, and that is the Toro size. I later, in this fictional life, release it in Robusto and Churchill. But I digress. The Toro is released, it wins Cigar of the Year. It's a Puerto Rican puro. It puts Puerto Rican tobacco on the map. It gets people talking about it. But more than anything, it pays tribute to the legend of Pedro Albizu Campos, the legacy of Pedro Albizu Campos. And this is, of course, a fantasy world. I wake up and I realize that I am not the owner of a cigar company, and that Puerto Rican tobacco is not being produced in large enough quantities, nor fine enough quantities, to produce any kind of cigar for that matter. Now, 2 or 3 years later, I discovered Don Collins out in Puerto Rico, in San Juan, and they actually have a Puerto Rican puro. They don't advertise, and they certainly don't do much on social media, so they're kind of like a little touristy trap for cigar lovers, but they're the real deal. And I try this Puerto Rican puro of theirs, and I'm not blown away by it. I don't think it's that great. So I say to myself, if this is the future, or if this is the present state of Puerto Rican tobacco, then I don't know. I don't know. It's kind of mild. It's herbally. It's not. There's actually a review somewhere on there that I did, but they do have other fine cigars. They just didn't make what I thought would be the ideal representation of a Puerto Rican puro. Now, this isn't a Puerto Rican puro. A Club del Turo, as I mentioned in the closer look, recently released a Puerto Rican puro under Privada Club. Now, they had planned to produce a Puerto Rican puro, but I think that this deal with Privada kind of made it happen a lot sooner. Perhaps a little sooner than they may have thought, perhaps. Or maybe they were ready. Maybe they were ready and they were just sitting on the tobacco, letting it age, letting it mellow out, preparing it. Nonetheless, this is a Connecticut wrapper. And the rest of it is from Puerto Rico, from their farm. And they named it after Pedro Albizu Campos. They named the cigar Pedro Albizu Campos. I'm okay with the cigar being named Pedro Albizu Campos, but I would have preferred my name, right? The one that I had kind of thought about. I guess I'm biased, right? I mean, I came up with the name, so I would have preferred if they named it El Maestro, which translates to the teacher or the professor. In his case, he was given this nickname because of his oratorial skills. And he was a professor as well, so he was teaching. And this was a nickname that he earned. But let's take a quick look at his life. We are not going to talk too much about his life because we could go on. He did a lot of things, but I'm going to tell you why paying homage to such a great man, such a great Puerto Rican patriot, means something to me, and I'm sure means something equally great to Francisco and his brother. So Pedro was born in Machuelo Abajo, Puerto Rico, Ponce, Puerto Rico, to a Spanish father and a mother of African descent. His father abandoned Pedro and his mother, leaving them destitute at a very early age. Pedro's mom struggled with mental issues. She even tried to drown him several times, eventually drowning herself in the Portuguese River in Puerto Rico, and was never seen again. He was saved each and every single time that his mother attempted to drown him by friends and family, or friends of the neighborhood, I believe. 1912, he received a scholarship to study chemical engineering at the University of Vermont. In 1913, he transferred to Harvard University to continue his studies. Now, let me make something clear right here. A lot of people say Pedro, which at this time, he was Pedro Campos. He was not Albizu, because Albizu was his father's last name. And he had not been legitimized. Yeah, whatever. So, he was not the first Puerto Rican to be accepted or to even graduate from the University of Harvard. That distinction belongs to someone else. But let's just say he was one of the very first, if not the second. In 1914, Pedro volunteers to the U.S. Infantry Command. He starts off as a second lieutenant and in the Army Reserves. And then he's sent to the city of Ponce, his hometown, where he organizes the town's home guard. And then he gets sent to training, and upon completion, he was assigned to the 375th Infantry Regiment. The U.S. Army then segregated and also segregated Puerto Ricans of recognizable African descent. Features played a big role in it. How straight your hair was, how dark your skin was, how light your eyes were. Those things mattered. And they sent him to the black units, basically. He was classified as a black soldier. In 1919, honorable discharge with the rank of first lieutenant. Now, mind you, although he served in World War I, he didn't see any combat. Not any that I could find, because black soldiers and minority soldiers, they weren't sent to combat. They had other duties. I'm sure some did, but this is what I learned from his history. Yeah, so it starts off mild, the cigar. It does start off pretty mild. And it's very smooth. And it's a mellow tasting cigar. It's a hint of spice. Some pepper. Dry in the finish. Rather dry in the finish. I remember that the first time I smoked it, that I needed a good amount of liquids to keep going because it really dried the palate. That was what I felt. Again, that doesn't mean you're going to feel that. These things vary upon our saliva production rate for each individual and how it affects our palate. So you have to consider that. Some cigars are going to be dry, but not everyone's going to detect that dryness in the same way. Some of you already know this. So 1919, he's get the honorable discharge at first lieutenant, and in 1919 he returns to Harvard, where he is elected the president of the Harvard Cosmopolitan Club. The Cosmopolitan Club was really something that kind of started out in the Midwest universities, and it was sort of something to bring students from different cultures and nationalities and customs together so that they could discuss these cultures and customs and just basically come together and reach an understanding about the differences in their cultures. Harvard's Cosmopolitan Club actually started up in 1908. So here's Pedro elected to the president of this club in 1919. He has an interest in the cause for the Indian independence from the British, and he also helped establish several centers in Boston for Irish independence. He met and became friends with the Irish leader, and I'm going to mispronounce his name because I didn't look it up, Eamon de Valera, and later became a consultant in the drafting of the Constitution of the Irish Free State. In 1921, he graduates from Harvard Law School while studying philosophy, chemical engineering, and military science. He was fluent in 6 modern languages and 2 classical languages. The 6 modern languages, English, Spanish, French, German, Portuguese, Italian. The 2 classical, Latin and ancient Greek. The valedictorian issue. The valedictorian issue is something that I was taught and told about since I was a kid by my mom and probably every old school Puerto Rican that I met. He was not allowed to graduate or receive his diploma as other students had received it. They kind of created some difficulties for him and some roadblocks for him to get his diploma. And one of the reasons supposedly was that if he would have received those accolades, or if he would have been allowed to graduate in the way that normal students were, he would have had the highest GPA of his class, and thus he would have had to have been valedictorian, and thus he would have had to give the valedictorian speech, which some people feared was a little too soon for that to be happening. But I did some research on that, and as it turns out, I took a look at his report card for Harvard. Let me tell you, an excellent report card, very good grades. But not good enough to be valedictorian. No, and historians that looked into his grades also confirmed that. Very good scores, very good grades, but not sufficient to be valedictorian. So it is highly, highly unlikely that they feared he would be the valedictorian or have the highest GPA in his class. That wasn't it. It was simply just he was a black student, and they were going to make his life very difficult, and they were going to make his not only his entrance but his exit very difficult. But no, he was not going to be valedictorian. So that's a myth, actually. Upon graduation, though, finally receiving the diploma through the mail, He opens a law firm in Puerto Rico. He goes back to Puerto Rico. Everyone wanted this guy. The government, the U.S. government, offered him various jobs, very good paying jobs, where he would have been making very good money, and especially for a man of color to be making the kind of money that they were willing to pay him was, I mean, he would have been set, right? Like, he would have been set. He would have had a nice, comfy life. With that money, he probably would have been able to help some people as well. But no. He said, I'm going back to Puerto Rico. I'll open a law firm there. My law firm will help the underprivileged. It will help those that are in need. Take a break from Pedro Albizu Campos' story to talk about this cigar that is an inch in. 6x54, as I stated before. It is peppery, but it is of a white pepper and some cedar and some spice. There's a flavor of natural tobacco that courses through each puff, and then you get like that influence from the Connecticut shade wrapper, which offers neutrality, but it just goes very well with the criollo in the filler. And I think right now I can say that very much like when I first had this cigar a few months ago, it's gotten a few months of humidor time now, almost 4 months, but I had it after a month in the humidor, and it's smoking the same way. There isn't a very big difference. The burn is a little funky looking, the way that that the ash forms, but the burn line is very good. The draw is good. It is not an open draw, but it is not a closed draw. It's just right. I think it's burning at a slower rate, probably due to the higher humidity. But even when I smoked it at a lower humidity, it smoked well, and it didn't burn fast. It burned nice and slowly. There's a meatiness to the smoke that you get that I did not really anticipate in a cigar wrapped with Connecticut shade wrapper. You tend to think of Connecticut shade wrappers on Dominican, on a Dominican binder and filler, right? In some cases. In other cases, you can have a Connecticut shade wrapper with a Sumatran binder, and if it's not a mixture of Dominican and Nicaraguan, it could be a mixture of Colombian and Dominican tobaccos. I really think that cigar makers of today are getting really creative with their use of what we call exotic tobaccos, right? Tobaccos that we're not normally accustomed to. And Puerto Rico falls into that category because it's not the type of tobacco that most of us have read about in an upcoming cigar. It's just not. And it has been that way for many, many years, for most of our lifetimes. Now, if you were to ask a cigar smoker who might happen to be 100 years old, or a former cigar smoker who's 100 years old, he might tell you different. He might tell you, like my grandfather would tell me, Puerto Rican tobacco was great. It rivaled Cuba's tobacco. It was up there. No, the production was nowhere near as big as Cuba's, but even the Cuban masters that were crafting these incredible Cuban cigars were heavily impressed with the qualities of Puerto Rican tobacco. And I think that, where Francisco and Antonio Castro are in their journey in regards to the quality of their tobacco is very interesting, because right now they're at the point where some of their aged stuff is starting to be used. Some of the stuff that they've been saving for special cigars is starting to come out. And we're getting to experience some of those special release cigars using those tobaccos. This criollo tobacco, I love. I know it. I love it. I love criollo tobacco in general, but this particular one that they're growing is awesome. But how does it shape up in this cigar overall? It's like this cigar is mild, but not mild enough that you would say this is a macanudo, you know, a classic macanudo mildness. It has pop. I would compare it to the old time third baseman who only hit 10 home runs a year. And maybe he drove in 60 RBIs. But he played great third base, right? Or he just knew how to play the game. And he had enough pop in his bat that pitchers would respect him because they knew that although he wasn't trying to hit a home run, he could. And that's just how I'm picking up these flavors. Like, they're letting you know, like, look, I'm mild, I'm mellow, but I can be more. I've got a couple of puffs in me that are gonna send some shivers down your spine, and that's what I did get on a couple of puffs that I was having with this cigar, especially as I got further down and the strength increased a little bit. I was taken aback. I said, this is not a mild cigar, not in my opinion. I would classify it as mild to medium. I would not put just mild or light next to the description of this cigar, although it starts off that way. And I know that a lot of cigars start off a certain way and end another way, but I think even from the beginning, you get this feel that it's very flavorful and that it can be mild but very flavorful all at once, right? We find that with other cigars as well. Yeah, it's got that pepper, white pepper in the finish, and a little bit of spice, hints of cedar that come and go, but are dancing along the puff of every puff of the cigar that you take. That just kind of dances along with them, and yeah, I mean, I don't want to say I love it yet. I don't want to say I love it yet. I don't want to say anything yet because I got past the first inch and a half, give or take, and there's more cigar left. So I've got about another 45 minutes before sundown. So let me get to this. In 1924, Pedro Albizu Campos is elected as the vice president of the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party. Now, this time, he reunites with his father. I believe he reunites with his father between 1924 and 1930, his long-lost father, who, at finding out that his son is a big shot, Harvard grad, wants to give it another shot. And they reunite, and I don't know to the extent of how they made up, but they do, and he gives him his last name. And at that point, he is Pedro Albizu Campos. So in 1930, he's elected to president of the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party. And he says, I never believed in numbers. Independence will instead be achieved by the intensity of those that devote themselves totally to the nationalist ideal. And of course, he has a lot of famous quotes that, as Puerto Ricans, we are fond of. Many things that are ingrained within us, even though I didn't grow up on the island. My mother did, and my father did, and their family did. So it gets ingrained into who you are, like what you're about, like what Puerto Ricans went through, and what Pedro stood for, and how that made things better for you, and how that created opportunities for you. And mind you, he's a black Puerto Rican, so his life faced obstacles that perhaps someone that looked like Ricky Martin would not have had to endure. But you know how things go. When things are going too well, that's when you got to stop and say, this picture is just too rosy. Something's got to give. In 1936, he's arrested for the first time, charged with sedition and subversive activities. Now, sedition is organized speech or conduct that tends towards rebellion against an established power, right? And I think it fit the bill, right? That really fit the bill at the time, what he was doing. He wasn't being shy about his opposition to the colonialism that the U.S. was forcing upon Puerto Rico. There were atrocities that were being committed as well and being swept under the rug. The abuse that some Puerto Ricans had to tolerate at the hands of some U.S. officials was also something that really rubbed him the wrong way. As an educated man, he could see past the BS, past the bureaucracy, past the political entanglements, if you might say. And in 1943, Pedro becomes seriously ill, and he is sent to Columbus Hospital in New York City, where he remained until the end of his sentence. And then in 1947, Pedro is released after serving 11 years. He returns to Puerto Rico. He begins to plan an armed struggle against the United States. Again, going back to his idea of he never believed in numbers. So he knows they're outgunned, outmanned, out everything. But he still has this hope that he can lead Puerto Rico to independence. This is what was promised, mind you, to Puerto Rico when Spain let go of Puerto Rico. They gave them their independence. But, of course, things didn't go that way. And in 1948, the gag law, or La Ley de la Mordaza, is put into effect. And this law made it illegal to own or display a Puerto Rican flag, even in your own home. Limited speech against the United States was also part of this law. And any speech against the United States government or in favor of Puerto Rican independence was also a no-no. And, at this point in time, Pedro is weighing his options. Now I've got to deal with this law that is just blatantly wrong. And if you break this law, it's 10 years in prison and a $10,000 fine, or both. And in 1950, he's arrested again after nationalist revolts throughout the island, one including the Jayuya uprising, where, yes, the American government bombed its own citizens. It bombed its own citizens. I repeat, it bombed its own citizens. I'm an American, love America, but I am not an idiot. I am aware that every government across the globe has committed atrocities, not just against their enemies, but against their own people at one point or another. No one is innocent or has bloodless hands. This is something that throughout the course of history has occurred. But in this particular case in the 1950s, it was quite a shocker for the United States to send bomber planes and drop bombs on Puerto Rican citizens, which were also American citizens, remember that. And a lot of people died. Pregnant women, children, people died. And it was quite jarring, to say the least. Pedro didn't like that at all. Oh no. And remember, he was a soldier. So in his mind, he had that mentality also as being a soldier. And knowing what it meant to follow orders, and knowing what it meant to have loyalty to your commanding officers, have loyalty to your country. But when your own country bombs you, and we've seen this play out in fictional movies before, right? Where the anti-hero, he doesn't hate his country. He just hates certain people within the government of his country that are either trying to kill him or kill his people or frame him or make him look bad. And there are all these injustices going on, and of course, politics at play. But this isn't a movie. This is real life. And so he's arrested again, and he's given 80 years. 80 years. And then in 1953, 3 years later, then Governor Luis Muñoz Marin pardons him. And it seems like, when you're reading his story, that it's going to turn out okay. He's been pardoned. But in 1954, a year later, the pardon is revoked, and he's arrested again due to the U.S. Capitol shooting led by Lolita Lebron. Now, he wasn't there that day. There's no proof of his involvement in the sense that there's nothing that they can actually tie him to. But in all likelihood, yeah, he probably did have something to do with it, or he knew about it, at the very least, right? Because he was the leader of this movement. And he wasn't the only leader. It's quite possible he could have vetoed this incident, this plan, and it went through anyway. We don't know. What the government knows is that they had a scapegoat. They had several scapegoats, and they had some guilty parties, and they arrested them, as well as over 4,000 people across the island that were considered a danger because they were members of the Nationalist Party. Now, in prison, radiation experiments were conducted on Pedro Albizu Campos, and he would wrap himself in wet towels to shield himself from the radiation. He was mocked by the guards as the king of the towels, el rey de las toallas, and he was getting seriously sick. Of course, there were investigations into it. Two sides. I won't get into it too much. But in 1956, he suffered a stroke and he was transferred to a San Juan hospital under police guard. In 1964, on his deathbed, Governor Luis Muñoz Marin pardons Pedro again. And this time, a year later, Pedro Albizu Campos passes away. He was a visionary leader. He improved the working conditions, and the social conditions for Puerto Ricans across the island. He touched a lot of different communities throughout the world. He was in resistance of colonial rule, as was his right to be against such colonial abuse. And things aren't the same anymore between the United States and Puerto Rico. Things have changed. Some things still can be better, can be a lot better, but you see them, and there are things that we could go into in discussing them, but we're not, because this isn't a political discussion here. This is a discussion about a cigar named after a visionary leader. And it is an important cigar for Puerto Rico. Now I will tell you my thoughts on what it tastes like to me at this point in time. It's been a slow burner. Some herbal notes. The spice and the cedar remained. The white pepper. The intensity of the white pepper kind of fluctuated. The meatiness of the smoke was there in certain puffs. The drying effect on the palate is still there. I mean, there's like this really dry feeling in the palate. Again, could just be my palate. But I think it's a good cigar so far. I think it's a good cigar. But I don't think it's a great cigar. One wonders, though, how a cigar like this would age. One does wonder. Well, I wonder, at least. I wonder how it would age, how it would further mellow out and become a classic mild cigar with nuances of flavor. And that flavor primarily being herbal, white pepper, cedar, a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper. It almost sounds like I'm describing a recipe here, right? Ingredients to a recipe, at least. But I will say this. It's an enjoyable cigar. Having smoked it before and smoking it now, it's enjoyable. It's got a good retrohale. It's got good flavor for a mild to medium cigar. It burns slow, regardless of the humidity you're in. And I think it offers a good, decent smoke. It really does. I mentioned something about the band that I would have liked it to have been a little bit more prominent, a little bit flashier, a little bit more je ne sais quoi, whatever. But at the end of the day, I think that you could always update this band, but what you're smoking is what matters, and that's what you should really focus on. Although if you're going to look at it from a business angle, I think that a flashier band does attract people more, especially the way people are nowadays. And the majority of cigar smokers are men, and men, we tend to be more visual. So yeah, it kind of makes sense to me that, cigar makers are trying to make these funky bands and bands that stand out on the shelves. But in this case, it's an interesting cigar. It pays homage to a very great man, and it delivers in quality. Like I said, the criollo in this, I know, and I love it. The cigar overall is very good. And it's tasty. It is tasty. I like, you don't get much sweetness from it, right? But there are moments when you'll get a bit of cedar and then a light sweetness in the finish. It complements it very well. I am going to come back with my full summary. How humid is it out here? I brought out this paper with notes. It feels as if it's soaked, like if it dropped in water. And yet it's been exposed to zero water. That's how humid it is. And the paper picked up that humidity, and it feels soft and moist. And the same thing can happen to a cigar. Luckily for me, I think dry boxing it really did the trick. Pero Jose, tell me, should I buy this cigar or should I pass? What should I do? Yeah, it's got a nice backstory. Yeah, it's dedicated to a legendary Puerto Rican. But what you described was pepper, cedar, herbal, natural tobacco, some black pepper notes, and a hint of sweetness. How is that pleasing to me? Well, it's one of those things that's hard to describe. These are all simple little flavors that we pick up on. It's not an incredibly complex cigar, but it has its moments. And I really do believe this is a very good cigar. Maybe I was a little harsh in coming out and just flat out saying it's not a great cigar. But maybe I said that because in my mind I was thinking of this fictional tale that I had, that a great cigar would win Cigar of the Year and it would be named after Pedro Albizu Campos. But that's not the case here. This is real life. This is a real story. And these brothers have crafted something that I believe is significantly above average. This tobacco screams at you. You know what it screams? It screams, I'm good now. Wait till you see me later, because I'm going to be even better, and I might just get that greatness that you're talking about. Right now, this is a company that in its really, 2019, 2020 is when it really started putting out some banger cigars, and a bulk of their success in some of the cigars that they introduced were in between 2021 and 2023. And over the last 2 years, they've just continued to get better and better and better. And their starting point, considering that they are not legacy farmers, in the sense that, this is not Partagas family, and this is not, the Cuban roots of Alejandro Robaina. This is not that. But this is something else that I feel is equally important. And this is the legacy of Puerto Rican tobacco. And they've really brought it back. They've really made you feel as if you are tasting something that you just haven't tasted before. So it's kind of hard to put your finger on it sometimes. But yeah, there are similarities to the Cuban tobacco. And you get that. In this cigar, perhaps not as much. But again, with some extended aging, I don't know what this is going to taste like. I got another one in the humidor. Maybe I'll smoke it in a year and see what it's like. This was stored at 6768 RH. And I think, like when I took it out of the humidor and I left it out, I was looking to get that cigar down to a 60-61 on the humidimeter. And once I saw that, I said, okay, I can step out. Right now, the humidity just soared to 80%, and it's smoking perfectly well. So I want to just say to you all, thank you for watching this episode of Backyard Cigars, and I hope you join me again in the near future. Until next time, I'll see you at Backyard Cigars. Thank you.